As we stand here in early 2026, there's one person whose ambition literally stretches from the car in your driveway to the stars in the night sky and maybe even into the wiring inside your own head. Today, we're going to map out the massive, interconnected, and, let's be honest, incredibly controversial empire of Elon Musk. Let's dive right in. So just to get a sense of the scale we're dealing with, look at this number. By the end of 2025, Elon Musk's net worth hit a peak of around $600 billion. I mean, that's not just rich, that's a level of financial power that rivals the entire economic output of some countries. And that kind of capital is absolutely central to how this whole empire functions. So that begs the question, right? How on earth does one person build an empire that covers outer space, electric cars, artificial intelligence, and the human brain? I mean, on the surface, it just looks like a random collection of moonshot projects. But when you dig a little deeper, you find there's a surprisingly simple logic connecting every single piece of this puzzle. And here it is. This is the core idea for the material we're looking at today. This isn't just a portfolio of cool tech companies. It's really a single cohesive system. Every company, every project is basically a tool that's been engineered to tackle what Musk sees as the biggest threats to humanity's long-term survival.
Okay, so let's start with the foundation of it all, because before you get to the rockets, before you get to the robots, you have to understand the mental model, the way of thinking that even allows someone to try to disrupt so many huge established industries all at once.
And it all boils down to this, first principles thinking. It's all about ignoring how things have always been done. So instead of saying, well, rockets have always been expensive, the question becomes, what are the fundamental laws of physics and the raw material costs that go into a rocket? When you build up your logic from those basic truths, you can end up with completely new and much, much cheaper solutions. This is the intellectual key that he used to unlock both the aerospace and auto industries.
And the very first, and maybe the most dramatic use of that thinking brings us to the first pillar of this empire, SpaceX, and its incredibly audacious goal of making humanity a multiplanetary species. Yeah, what's so cool about this slide is how clearly it lays out the disruption. The old way, for decades, was to build these $100 million rockets and then just throw them away in the ocean after one use. The SpaceX way was to say, what if we could land them and reuse them like airplanes? By doing that, and by making almost everything themselves, they just completely shattered the old economics of getting to space. But the Falcon 9 rocket, as amazing as it is, was really just the opening act. The ultimate vision, a real self-sustaining city on Mars, that depends entirely on this machine, the Starship. And this isn't just a bigger rocket. It's a total game changer, designed from the ground up to be fully and rapidly reusable. The goal is to make spaceflight feel less like a monumental government project and more like booking a flight on a commercial airline. So 2026 is shaping up to be a make or break year. And the plan is incredibly ambitious. First, just get to orbit successfully. Then they have to demonstrate this absolutely critical technology, orbital refueling, basically topping up the tanks in space, which is the only way to get a heavy payload all the way to Mars. Then, when the planets align later in the year, they'll send the first uncrewed ships. And here's where it all connects. What's the cargo? Robotic workers. Specifically, Tesla's Optimus robot. And that need for advanced robots on Mars is the perfect pivot to the next huge piece of this empire. You probably think of Tesla as a car company. And you're not wrong, but it's really not just a car company anymore. Musk himself has been saying this for a while now. He's been really clear about this pivot in strategy. Sure, the cars are selling like crazy, but the company's real focus, the thing that justifies its mind-boggling valuation, is its future in artificial intelligence and robotics. And that strategy really breaks down into these three main projects. You've got full self-driving, which is constantly getting smarter by learning from billions of miles of real-world driving data. Then you have the Cybercob, which is a purpose-built vehicle designed to be a robotaxi from day one. And finally, there's Optimus, the humanoid robot that's meant to revolutionize manufacturing here on Earth. And of course, eventually build that city on Mars. The really mind-blowing thing about the Cybercab isn't just the tech, it's the potential economics. The goal is to get the cost per mile down to around 25 cents. Now, if they can actually pull that off, it doesn't just compete with Uber or a taxi. It would become cheaper than owning your own car. That could completely rewrite how we think about transportation in cities. So we've got interplanetary travel covered, and we've got autonomous robots on the ground. But what's the digital network, the nervous system that's supposed to connect all this stuff? Well, that would be the third pillar, the controversial and incredibly ambitious merger of X and XAI.
So, the path for X, the platform formerly known as Twitter, has been, well, it's been rocky, especially financially. As you can see here, ad revenue, which was its traditional lifeblood, took a huge nosedive after the takeover in 2022. That created a really urgent need for a completely new business model.
And the proposed solution was the 2025 merger with Musk's other company, XAI. This move was brilliant in a way because it solved two huge problems at once. It helped fix X's financial issues, but more importantly, it created this perfect feedback loop. X provides a massive, real-time fire hose of human conversation to train the AI, and the AI, which is called Grok, then powers the entire platform. So this is the three-step playbook to try and turn X into what's been called an everything app. Step 1, the massive user base is the data source that trains the AI. Step 2, that AI engine makes the user experience better. And then the final piece of the puzzle is a new financial layer, X Money, which is aiming to handle everything from simple payments to banking, all inside one app. Okay, so from building a digital network for the whole world, we now pivot to the most philosophically ambitious and, for a lot of people, the most deeply unsettling part of the empire, building a network for the human mind itself. This is Neuralink, and its goal is nothing short of merging human consciousness directly with AI.
And by the end of 2025, this really wasn't science fiction anymore. Neuralink had already implanted its device in several human patients. We saw the first participant controlling a computer, playing video games, using only their thoughts. On top of that, the FDA granted them breakthrough status for a project aiming to restore sight, and they started expanding their clinical trials into other countries. But, and this is a big but, the project has some very serious critics in the scientific community. As our source material points out, a lot of researchers argue that just focusing on bandwidth, basically getting more data out of the brain, is a really simplistic engineering approach to an incredibly complex biological organ. It doesn't necessarily mean we actually understand what causes the diseases Neuralink is trying to cure.
And all of this brings us to our final section, where you realize that all of these incredible, world-changing technologies are being driven by a very chaotic and controversial engine. This is what you might call the Musk Paradox. This story of immense, rapid creation that is constantly paired with immense disruption and conflict. I mean, the year 2025 was just a masterclass in this chaos. It kicked off with a major lawsuit from the SEC. Then came this bizarre, short-lived appointment to run a new government efficiency department, which was actually called DOGE. That whole thing ended in a very public falling out with the president. And then the year wrapped up with the court reinstating his massive, multi-billion-dollar pay package from Tesla. It was just a constant state of conflict. And underneath all that headline-grabbing drama, there's an even deeper conflict brewing. His companies are facing these persistent legal battles over worker safety. But even more significantly, SpaceX is in the middle of a legal fight to challenge the very constitutionality of the National Labor Relations Board. That's the main federal agency that has protected workers' rights in America for almost a century.
Which leaves us right here with the ultimate question. Is this whole interconnected empire a legitimate blueprint for the next stage of human evolution? Or is it just a fragile, monumental overextension of one single person's power and reach? I guess the answer really depends on whether those rockets fly in 2026, and whether the rest of us are ready for what they're carrying.